What's up, everybody? Welcome to the actual first episode of the podcast. This is being released alongside the intro to the podcast, which will talk more about what we want to cover on here and the direction we want to go with it. So if you're interested in that, definitely go and check it out. But in this one, we're going to be talking to a new buddy of mine that I met this year at NAB. His name is Simon Eisenbach. He does a ton of remote travel, videography, and humanitarian work for some nonprofits. And we're going to cover a ton of different things, talking about his experiences and the tools he uses. Some of the topics that we talk about are traveling to remote locations and preparing for those, prepping all of the gear and getting ready to travel, the importance of redundancy in all aspects from gear to actually bringing more people in case somebody gets sick, how to get into remote travel videography if you're just starting out, knowing the limitations of the country that you're traveling to, and just knowing how important that is, whether that's cultural, with who you can talk to, or whether that's gear related with what gear you can actually bring into the country. And then lastly, we talk about stepping up your production with the limited amount of gear that you can bring on some of these remote travel shoots. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Now let's get right into it. Here is Simon Eisenbach.
Awesome. So, like you said, my name is Simon Eisenbach. I'm based in Utica, New York right now. I do a lot of work all over the world. I do work with nonprofits and NGOs in developing countries. I specialize in basically helping them do fundraising better. It's a long backstory, how I got into it. But that's basically the gist of what I do in the short version. We'll dig into it a little bit more as we go.
Definitely. Let's talk about some of your experiences and any trips you got coming up.
Sweet.
Any ones you just finished that you came from?
I haven't done one recently, but last year I did two bigger trips, which was a pretty good deal for me. Normally I try to do one trip a year right now. I'm trying to scale it up eventually to do 3 or 4. But a lot of these projects I'm self-funding or it's donor funding, that kind of thing, because a lot of these orgs just don't have money. I typically deal with the smaller nonprofits, so a lot of times they're just trying to get by with what they got. And so basically what I do is I create media packages for them to use. And last year I was in DR Congo. It was so far remote that during the Civil War there was no fighting, in this little village called Nibabongo. And that's in northeastern Congo, but super, super deep. We actually had to fly into Uganda and then take a private charter plane into the Congo. Wow. And then that was a little going in, we were lucky that we were also pit stopping and dropping another crew off somewhere, so we had a bigger plane. But coming out, we were in a 6-seat plane that we were like almost at max capacity for weight of the plane. So that was interesting.
How long do those travels take to get from mainland, because you're in the States, all the way to these remote areas?
Usually a minimum of 16 hours of flight time. It depends on exactly where, obviously. Where I do go in West Africa, a lot of times it's about 16 to 18 hours, not including layovers or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Normally it takes us about a day and a half to get places. DR Congo, it took us 4 days to get there, but we actually came home in 24 hours on the ground, but it was 36 hours of time because of time zones and all that stuff. And that was crazy running back from the Congo. But then when I go to Southeast Asia, it's 15 hours to get from JFK to Hong Kong, and then you still have to get wherever else you're going.
Right. And most of the time that's by bus or cars or something? Or
no, it's another flight, because I don't actually stay in Hong Kong often. I've only been to Hong Kong once. A lot of times it's Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, those kinds of places where you're still having to get out after there. But it's the easiest I've found is to go direct from JFK to Hong Kong, because you can get those flights now instead of having to do a layover in LA or that kind of thing, where it may be shorter flights, but you have the layover and all that stuff, so it just takes longer.
It's more of a pain. You can lose your gear. And
Exactly. It's one more place that gear can get lost in the shuffle, so it's one of those things that it just sucks, but in the long run it pays off. So that's kind of the way we go about travel. DR Congo, we had to go. I usually, being based in New York, I'll drive down to JFK And part of that's because I get free parking there because my cousin lives 10 minutes away from the airport. And that's a huge money savings. On top of the fact that I don't have to do the airport transition of domestic to international. And then I'll fly JFK to anywhere pretty much. So when we went to Congo, it was JFK to Qatar, Qatar to Uganda, Uganda into the Congo. A lot of times in West Africa, we're either flying through Paris or Belgium, and it's JFK, Belgium or Paris, Paris down to Burkina Faso or Mali is usually the two that I've gone to. Last year I got lucky when I went to Senegal. It was a direct from JFK to Senegal to Dakar. And that was nice. That was only 9 hours.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, still 9 hours, but a lot less than the day and a half of travel.
And no layovers was great.
Hopefully you guys can't hear this rain. It's starting to come down pretty hard, but I think we're close enough that it shouldn't pick up on the mics.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't hear it too much in the headphones.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good. Yeah, so you're talking about like traveling. What's your experience with traveling with gear, and like how do you pack for that and prepare for going on these remote international flights? Yeah,
so I do the how low profile can I be approach. Part of what I do is I started as a solo operator, and then I've started to be able to bring an extra shooter with me on some of my more recent projects. And being a solo operator, I've always had to stay super lean and mean, so that way I could not have gear getting in the way of what we were trying to do. That's one of the things that, like, there's lots of things that I would love to bring and I would love to use, but it would just get in the way of what we're trying to do, and that defeats the purpose of going. So really what I'm looking at is how can I stay in my 2 carry-ons and my 2 check bags. I've never, except for when I moved to Taiwan for a 6.5-month stint, which wasn't specifically for a shoot, I've stayed in the 2 check bag and 2 carry-on. I just use very specific baggage that allows me to do it and be able to protect my equipment at the same time. I use, to protect tripods and stuff, I use a Eddie Bauer duffel. That's a rolling duffel that's got like a hard-sided bottom that I can put padding in the bottom and protect the tripods that they're not going to get completely destroyed. I also use carbon fiber tripods because they're a little lighter weight and they can get in and out and they pack smaller and that kind of thing. And then for the more sensitive stuff, I use actually a Coleman like rolling check bag. That is, it looks like the typical hard side thing, but it was like $25 at TJ Maxx or something. And
can't beat it.
It does the job, and I can put all the chargers and stuff like that I'm a little more fragile. And then I line the inside with foam, so that way it protects it all. And then a lot of times with my chargers, I actually keep like a thin piece of plastic that is like pretty stiff, and then I Velcro all my chargers to it. And that way I can just literally pull that whole little thing out and just set it on the floor and then charge.
Yeah, that's nice to have like the organization of that, especially having like just going into remote places and being able to pull it out, have one thing that has all your chargers already set up, and you just need one plug, so you're not like...
The slight bit of weight that I get with that, it's super flexible plastic, so it's not like I'm just like carrying it around easy. You got to kind of be fragile. But it's so much easier having all the cable management done because it just makes my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
I
bet.
And then as far as camera equipment goes, I started with Nikon when I was first starting out and being more photocentric. I started with a D40 way back my senior year of college, and then so like I didn't actually pick up a camera until my senior year of college. So D40 was my first camera. I've never done the film route. And then D7000 was my intro to video.
Yeah, because you started as a photographer doing like photojournalism type stuff, or was it more?
I started as a photographer because it was the only elective I could take with the soccer schedule. My senior year of college, I played D2 soccer. And so the only elective class that I needed to graduate that was available because I was for like soccer games and stuff, was a Thursday night class, and the only one that was there was Intro to Digital Photo.
And it completely changed your life.
This is where I am now. So afterwards, I realized that like I liked photo, but I didn't like take it too seriously. And then I was working a job after college where I was making a ton of money with overtime. So I just started buying some better equipment for photo. And then I bought the D7000, and I happened to be able to shoot video. And I was like, I wonder what this video thing is. So I started toying around with video. And now I shoot more video than I do stills. So it's a very interesting way that things have kind of gone. But yeah, I do a lot of crossover now, so it's interesting. Early on, it was 2 camera bodies, 3 or 4 lenses, Video Mic Pro from Rode, and then like tripods. Like very, very minimal kit. I wasn't really trying to get too fancy with it. As time has evolved, I've gotten a little fancier. I bring a glide cam or that kind of thing. But with the crossover from being more photo to video and photo at the same time, I actually made the full switch earlier this year to Sony completely from Nikon. I had invested in the video side of Sony early with the FS5 right after it came out. And then I'd just been lens adapting, and quite frankly, the lens adapters for Nikon lenses are terrible.
Yep.
I've found a couple that did some of what I wanted, but none of them really did what I was hoping for. So I finally made the push, especially after the 3 series of the A7s. The A7R3 came out with the dual card slot and the better battery. That was a game changer for me because the better battery life was something I'd been waiting for. When I was in Senegal last year, they had actually loaned me an A7R2. And the thing, I loved it, but at the same time, it sucked because I had to carry so many batteries. Yep. I think I was carrying 10 batteries.
And you're constantly changing them out. Like you're on shoots and you're like in the middle of this moment, you're like, crap, the battery's running out. And then you got to go and change it all. And
I always had 2 batteries in a pocket.
Yeah, and your pockets are always filled with batteries.
Yes. So like I had a kind of system. I always wear cargo shorts or cargo pants. And one pocket, like my left side's always good batteries, my right side's always bad batteries.
So you can just cycle them through and swap them out.
Yep. And so, yeah. But, so like the better battery life was huge for me. And so that was where I was like, all right, time to make the full shift. So now I do the A7S2, A7R3, and the FS5. And that's really my compact kit. And then I mix lenses. I have a couple of the Rokinon Cine DS lenses, which I love the 85. The 85 is like my B angle for pretty much every interview that I do now.
85 is a great focal length just all around to have as a second angle, and it's usually a pretty fast lens too. Because I think
they're the T15.
15s, yeah. So you get some pretty good speed with it. And you get that like beautiful bokeh in the background.
It's actually, I had never used it until we were in the DR Congo, and my second shooter, Dana Wada from Greens Productions, had it with us, and he just started using it on B angle, and I was just like, dude, that looks so good.
I'm gonna start switching to that for my first angle.
We used that a ton just because it like blew the back out so much. A lot of the time with the run and gun, I'm using the 18-105 GS, but like the small one, not the giant one from Sony, because it's just such a flexible lens for the type of work that we're doing, and it's so lightweight that it just does the job. But you're not getting quite the same amount of separation that you do with those T15s, that it just separates the person from the background no matter where you are, and it's just glorious.
Yeah. We were talking about this last night, was the redundancy and like sort of pairing zooms with prime lenses.
Yes.
What's like the importance of that for you as like just being a travel and like trying to keep it lightweight but having all of that variety?
So that's actually a really good point. And I've got a perfect example to go with it. So for me, I always want to have 2 lenses that have a specific focal distance that I need. So I want to have 2 wides, 2 mediums, and 2 telephotos. My main zooms are 16-35, 24-105, and a 70-200. I picked the 24-105 over the set at 24-70 because of the optical stabilization and the crossover to photo video. That's a huge game changer for me because it just allows me to be flexible. I love the 24-70 2.8, but the lack of OSS in it is a killer for me.
Especially when you're doing a lot of stuff handheld and not locked down. It's not all interviews. It's a lot of just like run and gun shooting.
And a lot of times too, where I'll have like an A7S2 or an A7R that has that lens on it, it'll go from like shooting handheld stills to throwing it on a glide cam to throwing it on a gimbal. Like it's going all over. So I'm going from stills to video back and forth where I need to be able to be that have that flexibility. And going back to your point about the prime to zoom, I use a lot of zooms where we're having to go in and out of places quick. But then if it's like evening time or we have a specific shot or we're settling down for an interview, I'll cut to the prime so I can get that separation of the depth of field and that kind of thing. And it also gives me a lighter weight option without having total redundancy of the exact same lenses. So I can get a slightly different look, but I'm still protecting myself. Perfect example of having that is last year, one of my Rokinon Cine DS lenses actually dumped in sand because in Senegal, like all of the dirt is basically sand from where we were. And so I was changing lenses and someone bumped my elbow and 35 mil just went straight into the dirt. And I picked it back up and you could just like see sand dumping out of the back of the lens.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was
yeah, because
bad.
they're open in the back. They're not completely sealed on the back
Well,
end, right?
there's no weather sealing on them.
Yeah.
And so the lens just became useless and I literally put it in a little plastic bag and left it in my bag until I got home. And that was actually where I learned how to fix a lens because it was like a $400 lens. So I was like, it's fully manual. I can only break it so much.
Yeah.
And so I just pulled it apart, cleaned it out, re-oiled it, and took me a couple attempts putting it back together to make sure certain things were in the right direction. But yeah.
On the prime and zoom thing, you also get a good variety of like looks because you're getting that shallow depth of field on some of them. You're getting a deeper depth of field with your zoom lenses. So like changing up just like the aesthetics of how it's looking, you get a much bigger variety instead of trying to just like duplicate the same lens, like having two 24 to 105s in case one of them goes down or something like that.
Although I would keep two of those just because that lens is so money.
So versatile.
Well, it's so versatile for what I do that it just works. And it works really stinking well. And I've actually kind of contemplated going down to all A7s with what the new A7s can do and dropping the FS5 because then I can, again, have another layer of redundancy because I could put 3 A7 cameras in for the same size as an FS5. Even though the FS5 is still so stinking small, I could put 3 A7s in and then get the XLR hot shoe adapter.
Yep. Yeah, it's really not the weight either because the FS5 is almost like the same weight as a
It's only
A7
like
series.
3 pounds.
Yeah, like it's still super light.
Yeah, I just had my FS5 stripped down for the first time in probably 7 months because I just sent it to Sony to get cleaned, and I was like, I forgot how light it is, and I was like, oh, okay, yep, that's why I bought you.
Definitely, yeah. Throwing gimbals and just kind of throwing your backpack when you're hiking and stuff like that too.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's such a good little. It's insane how powerful that camera is for how small it is. And the fact that like I'm using the Mark.
It's got everything. I mean, it's got pretty much everything the FS7 Mark II has.
Pretty much whatever you could need for a lot of it. I mean, there's certain things that you might want.
Yeah.
For specific use, but for everyday shooting, I'm never like I wish I had an FS7. I've never once said that.
Yeah. The only reason if you're doing like long form 240 frames a second, so like if you're doing like sports or like you need a lot of high speed, but with the new FS5 Mark II, you can get RAW internally now, or you can do RAW out through the SDI. But even with that,
I have the RAW upgrade for the FS5 Mark I, and I go to a Shogun for if I do need continuous 240.
Yeah.
And I can still get it. So I have that capability. I just don't use it that often.
Yeah, because you don't need high-speed stuff with...
Most of what I do, I'm not doing anything that crazy. I mean, I'll shoot some sports here and there locally in the U.S., but it's not the majority. I mean, most of what I do day-to-day in the U.S. is corporate work. So it's a lot of talking heads, a lot of factory B-roll, and that kind of stuff. So I'm not needing that continuous slow-mo.
Yeah.
But it is nice.
Yep, definitely. Talking with the lens redundancy.
Yeah.
Other things that you have to have redundancy for is like hard drives.
You literally have to have redundancy for everything, including people.
Yeah.
So like that's part of why I switched to having a second shooter is some of the projects I'm going on are getting so far remote that if something were to happen where one of us gets sick, that way we can still get the job done. I keep going back to DR Congo because that was one of my biggest projects for as far as like scope of work and what we were trying to achieve. And because of the fact that like I could have probably gotten a shooter from Uganda, but by the time we got the person in there, like who knows how good that person was.
And you got on the same page with them and everything like that.
And like if there was a situation where I got sick and like I was down for the count for 2 days. We had 9 days to get everything. And we shot the equivalent of probably, we've put 7 or 8 videos out for them, not including behind the scenes or vlog or that kind of stuff, because we vlogged the whole trip.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have probably another 4 or 5 videos in the pipeline over the next few years. So kind of my goal with that is I look at what an org's growth plan is for the next 4 years and try and capture as much of that content as we can. So that way, if or when they're ready to go do the next phase of what they're trying to do, I already have the content, and then we just have to edit. It saves them a ton of money long run. It may take us an extra day or two, but a day or two when I'm already there is better than 7 days of me having to go back or somebody having to go back.
Yeah.
So it's looking at the long term. It may suck because you're having a ton more storage. Like, I mean, we were talking about this last night with like data just eating hard drives.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff sitting on a hard drive doing nothing for a bit. But when you think about it as a long-term play, it pays off for both you and the organization.
Yeah.
Although I'd rather still be over there.
How much data are you shooting? And like, are you, because your cameras can do 4K shooting on the 87s, are you doing 4K, 1080, and how much like data rate are you doing?
It really varies project to project, and it depends on other varying issues that we run into. Perfect example, DR Congo again, we were completely run on solar power, and we were very limited on our solar power, so we couldn't actually shoot in 4K. When I was in Senegal, I had access to solid power, so I was able to charge and everything, so I was able to shoot 4K.
And keep things plugged in.
Plugged in. But in DR Congo, we were only able to charge every camera battery once a day and our laptops once a day. And we were shooting about 200 gigs of data between video and stills a day. And that was shooting 1080. I think we were shooting everything 24. And then stills were full RAWs out of 5D Mark IIIs from Canon.
Okay, so not huge file sizes from the photos.
Not huge file sizes, but at the end of the trip, I think we ended with about 9,000 stills in the library. Yeah.
So for 9 days, so that's
for 9
like
days, it's 1,000 photos. There was one day that was super heavy because they had a celebration for a brand new pediatric building that was built that a bunch of donors had paid for. Mm-hmm. And they had like the police chief of the province, the health minister for the province, like all these dignitaries came in. So they were like, hey, can you like really make sure we get this covered so that way we can thank the people that spent a lot of money, because the building was actually super, super awesome where there's an organization out of California. I forget the exact name of it, but they get equipment that's being thrown away by hospitals donated. And they store it, and then they fundraise the shipping container cost to get it overseas to hospitals in remote parts of the world. And so they had these like maybe 10-year-old like baby incubators, beds, and stuff like that were all powered.
Yeah. And
because they're American, they only run on 110. So they actually had this brand new system that was in the middle of being installed that was a split 220 volt, 110 volt system.
Like outlet. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had, well, it was 2 separate runs of outlets, but it came back to a single bank of batteries that came out of the solar and then split out of the bank. Super interesting, super complex stuff that goes way over my head as far as electrical.
Yeah.
But it was super cool to see the fact that they were able to do these cool things, that they were able to then help provide better life for the people in the area.
Yeah. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Do you work a lot with like the hospitals, and like who are you going over there with, I guess, or like for? So I work a lot in medical and I work a lot in education, just because those are 2 hot button things that deal a lot of places around the world. And also it goes back to how I got into it. My dad's the reason I got into it, and my dad's a civil engineer who's been building hospitals in West Africa since 2002. That's his side fun. And so I started out tagging along with him. So when I started picking up the camera, I started shooting stuff that I was on with him, and that's kind of where it snowballed. So I was just shooting what was available to me. Yeah.
My West African contacts are people that I've met through my dad. And then a lot of the other ones are orgs that are, everything's pretty much an organization based in the U.S., but there's expats over there, or They're just working to support. So like E4 project that I was in the Congo with, I met the previous development director in the locker room after the alumni soccer game at my alma mater, that we just happened to be talking about Burkina Faso, where I had been a bunch and he used to live in. And then when the new development director came on, he was looking through, and apparently there was a tag next to my name that said photo video. He reached out to me and we started talking, and that's how that project happened.
So just right place, right time sort of thing.
Right place, right time. Senegal happened because I was working for my best friend. He's from Central New York. He moved overseas. He's a bookkeeper with the Christian Missionary Alliance, and he also does some other stuff with education out in the villages. And so we were over there shooting for education stuff. And then Burkina Faso, like I said, is just all connects with my dad. So it's all right place, right time, or just knowing people that know people. It really comes down to the network.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I guess we had talked about like any tips for like people who are trying to get into remote travel.
Make sure it's a topic that you're really diehard about and something that you can really back, because you have to know the topic inside and out. Like if you're not bought in, like I could tell you more about E4 Project and their goals and their ambitions with improving the status of living in the Congo than I can about tech specs of a lot of cameras. Mm-hmm. I can tell you more about what's going on in Burkina Faso and Mali and the hospital my dad built in the Mali, where the birth rate's comparable to the U.S. in an area that didn't have anything close to that. They didn't have a hospital within like 10 hours before. So like you really got to be passionate about the topic, or else you're going to not really be invested. Mm-hmm. And you have to really know the people, or be willing to get to know the people.
Yeah, we had talked about like learning the culture and really understanding where it is that you're going before you go there, so that like you're totally appropriate for everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that you don't realize until you travel. Perfect example, like dress code where you go. Every country's different, similarities that cross over, but a lot of times it's different. DR Congo, we were allowed to wear shirts and a t-shirt most days, but when it came to the celebration day, they actually made us custom button-up shirts, which was pretty sweet. And mm-hmm. then we had to wear pants for the whole day. And it was like a 95-degree day with 100% humidity. Yeah.
Hot.
Yeah. and then like you go up to Burkina Faso, where we could wear T-shirts, but we had to wear pants when we were out in public. And then you go over to Senegal, where we had to wear a polo shirt and pants while we were working, no matter what. That's just the way the culture worked. And then the way you greet people culturally, the way you greet people culturally, the way that you interact, the way the interviews go, like everything's got like slight nuances mm-hmm. to the region.
So it's like who you can talk to and who you can't talk to.
Right, who you can talk to, who you can't talk to, what types of questions are appropriate to ask certain people, those kinds of things. Things that there's certain things you just never say around certain people, even if you're not asking them a question. Those kinds of things. I mean, even the nuances of getting in and out of countries. I mean, we were talking about this last night with drones. Like, some countries have no regulations about drones. Some countries we won't even let it into the country. Some countries you can do X, Y, Z. Like DR Congo, there was no restrictions other than don't fly at night and don't fly over people. Mm-hmm. So like we were flying
pretty relaxed.
Right. Like we put a Mavic to 3,000 feet in the air. It was insane.
How did it handle?
It was fine. It was fine handling. We also put it about a half a kilometer to a kilometer away in distance at 1,000 feet. And it was just cruising. Nice. We started to lose signal when we went out distance, but like it took it 5 minutes to come down from 3,000 feet.
That's crazy. That's super high up.
Yeah. It was cool because you could see the clouds. Like you could see the shadow of the clouds on the ground. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, because in the States, it's limited to 400 feet.
Yeah.
And it's like super restrictive of where you can fly and where you can't fly and what, like.
Well, I mean, we also got flown in onto a grass runway. Like,
yeah.
There's no, like, the only planes that ever come in and out are the planes that are picking up specific people that are known travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a funny story about the drone getting it into a country. I was shooting a wedding like a couple of years ago, and one of our guys flew over from India. We were shooting an Indian wedding, so he was going to be there to sort of like help translate and help us know like what's going on. and he ended up bringing a Mavic with him. But going through like customs in India and flying out, you can't travel in and out of the country with drones.
Yeah.
So what he ended up doing was just like pretty much taking it all apart, taking the propellers off and all that, and he took a label maker and he just put audio recorder on it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that when they pulled it
amazing.
out for security, they just saw it because it folds up so it doesn't look like a drone.
Well, that's one of the things I love about the Mavic is it's so tiny that it looks discreet, especially if you take the props off, people don't have a clue what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Unless
so you
you
just
really know.
fool them with a little label that says, no, this is not a drone.
Especially if you keep the rubber thing over the camera.
Yep. Yeah, because it covers it up so they don't see the gimbal and all of that.
Yeah. No, that makes it so much easier to get in and out of the country. I mean, and also, again, similar to getting in and out of countries, every country has such different like rules for traveling in and out.
Like going through customs and what needs to be scanned and like searched.
Even what you need for a visa. Like, so I've spent a ton of time in Africa because that's just where I've had opportunities. And like Senegal, you don't pay a dime to get in. You literally get a free visa on entry. The only thing you really need to say is like when you're leaving and where you're staying. They want to make sure you're not just going to mooch off.
Yeah.
But the government and the people got the understanding of like, if we make it easy for people to get here, they're going to come. And it's hilarious. Senegal, because it is a coastal country, is almost like a Caribbean country to the Americans, but for Europeans. So like you see a ton of Europeans going down there just for vacation. And then you go to Burkina Faso where it's like a 5-year visa. And then you go to DR Congo where it's a 90-day visa. And you have to get like letters of invitation and like all this other stuff and pay fees and this and that.
Yeah.
And so it's just like crazy how drastically different getting in and out of each country is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Because I know, I mean, like even coming to the States, if you're from European countries, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on the reason you're coming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I
guess for work or for any
right. If you're coming for work and any reason, they're going to nail you. But if you're just coming to vacation, it's fairly simple. I mean, it's the same thing for going to Europe just to vacation. Mm-hmm. It's pretty straightforward. It's just like, here's my American passport. Here's how long I'm staying. Here's my flight out, like that kind of thing. Same thing with Thailand was pay for a visa on arrival. Here's how long I'm staying. Here's where I'm staying, that kind of thing. So yeah. Super simple.
Cool. Let's go back to talking about some more gear stuff.
Of course.
And like we talked about sort of going off the grid and the difference between like just shooting remotely in places that like have power versus like completely being separated from any sort of civilization by hours.
Oh, totally.
And like what are the requirements that you need to like keep in mind when you're doing that sort of travel versus just going to a place that's...
You got to do the research of knowing exactly what your power source is going to be, whether it's Genny power or solar, or if you have to bring your power with you, that kind of thing. Thankfully, I haven't had to bring power in yet, but it could happen. But like when I was in Burkina Faso, we're working off Genny power, so we're able to get some stuff in, but it's still, you want to try and be lean because you don't want to run the Genny all the time because gas is expensive in a lot of these countries. Mm-hmm. Then Nebo was solar power only. So those are some considerations that you got to think about when it comes off. Like, I mean, there's a lot of good solar stuff out. Like Goal Zero makes some pretty decent stuff. I've actually been testing one of their setups for some stuff coming up. And then you've also got to think about batteries. The thing that a lot of people forget about is like the size of the charger and the weight of the charger. Like for me, shooting with like a Red or an RE Alexa Mini, even though they're fairly small camera bodies, the accessories that have to go with it just make it so much heavier that it's not conducive for the type of shooting I do.
Right.
There are people that go into these countries with those kinds of cameras, but that's just not my workflow.
Yeah.
And where I was in Congo, you couldn't operate that.
Yeah, you would have had to bring in all of your power and not be able to charge, so you would have been carrying 20 batteries for like 2 days.
Well, we couldn't have done that because where we were, the plane in and out, we only had 200 pounds of bag weight for 2 people. So like...
Yeah, because you're on small prop planes, so the weight limits are pretty restrictive.
It was literally 2 people, all of our personals and our camera equipment, 200 pounds. Yeah, not much weight.
So that's
That's
not a lot at all.
No.
And for how long was that for?
That was for 9 or 10 days we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
We had 3 tripods, a camera crane, a gimbal, a glide cam, 2 5D3s, 2 A7S2s, an FS5, 9 or 10 lenses, just so we had redundancy and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's your difference from going off grid versus like lightweight travel backpacking style shooting? So like things where you're going to be hiking up where you're not going to have power, like you're not going to be carrying a generator with you, or like
No. I would scale it back to just because I'm a Sony guy, I would scale it back to like an A7 if I had to go super lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I knew I was backpack only, if I was like backpacking where it's like you are only allowed to take what's on your back, I would go to A7 right now at this point in time with what technology is.
Yep.
2 A7 threes, a 24 to 105, and probably like a 16 to 35 and an 85. And I would just keep it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Super, super lightweight. And then like the XLR adapter. And then I would do... Actually, I don't even know if I would do an XLR adapter. I would probably go with like, if I was shooting interviews, I'd probably go with like a Rode Video Micro, a Rode Video Mic Pro R, like the Rycote, because the mount's just so much more durable.
Yeah.
And then I don't even know if they sell the original one anymore.
I don't think so. You could probably buy it off eBay or something.
Probably, but it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And then I would do like the Zoom F1, that little teeny thing that I was telling
Oh
you
yeah,
about
you
last
just showed
night.
me last night. Yeah.
That's just like a mini audio recorder that you can use as a lav if you have to lav someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that can get you a lot further for a lot less weight. And then that keeps you in, you have one type of battery that you're bringing. It's all small batteries, so you don't have to worry about that. And then my ideal setup for offload and everything right now would be a MacBook Pro, 2 hard drives, and then I would actually bring a NAR box. The 2.0 looks super slick.
Yeah, I used the old one, but I haven't seen the new.
I
haven't played with the new one yet.
I mean, I got to hold the freight case of the new one at NAB, but obviously it was just still a shell because they were in prototyping.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can do it without having to use your phone is huge. And
That's great,
so doing that combo of like having a laptop but then also a separate thing without having to carry a second laptop is game changer for me, because that way I know I can still get everything off and backed up and everything, because I'm carrying at least again redundancy. I carry two separate brands of hard drives, so that way if one fails, like that might be a little paranoid, but I just like to have myself spread out.
No, you gotta have backups because
Right.
they don't have to send you back in there to do
Right.
it again.
Right. And it's not like I'm sponsored by a camera hard drive company that's going to just ship me tons of hard drives.
Right. So you have them for free. How do you do you have any tips for upping your production value when you're shooting in like such a lightweight package? Like ways to get the most out of that gear that's going to like improve the quality and like style of what you're shooting?
I guess the big things would be 3 points of contact, whether it's like locking down on a tripod and then like doing like focus racks for like little nuances, or doing like put a camera strap over your shoulders and then like do like a camera move that way, just like push it taut. That's one that I use a ton when I'm traveling, just because it makes it so easy. A lot of times when I'm overseas, I do what I call the ghetto easy rig, where I'll have my backpack on and then I'll use Peak Designs cuff, and I'll actually have it hooked to the backpack, and then the camera hangs from that.
Okay.
And so with the FS5, it's great because it's literally like an easy rig, and I can just pick it up and then push off of the backpack.
Yeah, so you just have that
And
pressure
then-
and you can sort of swing it around.
Yep, swing it around and do like those kind of nuanced moves that bring in a little more production value. And then the biggest game changer for me that is a lightweight but still really powerful tool is actually the Devon Supertramp Glide Cam.
Mm-hmm.
And I say the Devon Supertramp specific one because it's so much easier to balance than every other glide cam.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, they came out with another one that has the same, like deck.
Like quick release sort of deck. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what they technically call the top part, if they call it a sled or a deck or whatever.
I don't remember.
But it's still like that top part is game changer because it's just so much easier to adjust and make the fine tune adjustments.
And you don't have to undo all 4 of the screws on the top
and then all of a sudden it
bottom,
just like slides all the other way and you're just like, but it's just one of those things that it just works so well and you can do so much with it. And then at the same time, there's no battery. So you don't have to worry about bringing battery chargers like on a gimbal. Then you also have the ability to, like, if push came to shove, you could set it down on something and use it as a tripod.
Yeah.
I've done it. It's not the greatest because you don't have the ability to, like, pan and tilt. But if you needed
it's
to
more stable than handheld.
Right. So it's one of those, like, I've set it on a chair and, like, had someone talking, or set it on a table and had someone talking in front of the camera. It just does it.
Yeah.
It's not the best, but it's not the worst. So it can be a B angle if you had to do something. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Do you use, because you mentioned gimbals, do you ever use gimbals on your shoots, or you're pretty much only, like, you try to do everything with
It depends
power?
on the shoot.
Yeah.
If I know I'm going to have power, I'll bring a gimbal. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get a smaller gimbal. I don't like the single post ones because I just don't like the feel of it. Like, I don't feel like I have the same control.
Yeah.
But I want something smaller than the Ronin M. Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that usually if I'm on the gimbal, I'm using the A7S II or the A7R3. I like to have something super compact, but I haven't found and gotten my hands on something that, like, has the control. Like, if they made a single post gimbal where you could bring the dual handle operator, like, up right around the camera, I'd be in love. But, like, they're all, like, the handles are super far below the camera, so it's almost like a crane move whenever you tilt.
Unless you're pushing in,
right?
Instead
so
of just like, you have to do like a funky
yeah.
pull back as you tilt down.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times, like, it's nothing against people using the single post gimbals because I see them all over the place, but it's not the same move, and it's not the same type of move, and it's not the move that I want. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I just did a tilt." I'm like, "No, you did like a crane-ish type move down, where it's a totally different feel because it is pushing in." Mm-hmm. And so I just like my comfort zone of like a nice little two-handle compact. But I just like it. I just want something super small that can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That goes down to the power though.
Right. Yeah. If you have power,
perfect.
Sure, you'll bring it.
Yep.
Because most of them are lightweight enough now.
Right.
Because they're all carbon fiber. Or
right. Well, I mean, the Ronin M's super lightweight, but it's still just bulky. There's a company, ACR.
It's not easy to pack.
There's a company out of Poland, ACR Systems, that makes one that I'm really interested in. That it's coming out, I think, end of the summer. That they had it at NAB, and it's got like a super compact ring that you can just set it down on the ground, so you don't have to carry the stand around.
Did you ever see the Lettuce Helix Junior?
Yes. The thing I don't like about those is it's like super, like you can't just like drop it into a low mode. You have to like spin it and like.
Yeah. You can do like the briefcase side, so it like drops it down to the side.
Right. But it's just like
you can't get like right above the ground.
Right. Like I want to be able to just get like right above the ground. Mm-hmm. But this ACR Systems, I played with it at NAB, and it's like a small ring, but the ring actually also folds in half, like when you take it apart, which is huge.
Yeah,
and
so it collapses.
It's literally just this like tiny thing that's barely bigger than the A7. So it would be great for that type of thing. I just want to get my hands on it and test it.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we could talk about is some like just dealing with unknown weather. Like, do you have anything? Because I mean, weather's so unpredictable.
100%
with where you are. So like, what things do you have to protect you and the gear?
So there's the weather that you can account for, and then there's the weather you can't account for. In 2013, I was in Burkina Faso, and it was so hot that we actually melted a hole through a 9-volt battery.
Wow.
And that
how did that happen?
That was literally just sitting in my bag. I went to pull it out to use it, and there was just a hole literally through the side of the battery. And so that situation, we were trying to keep all the camera equipment had to stay out of cars and in shade when I wasn't shooting. And I was only able to shoot for small amounts of time until the cameras got too hot, and then I would have to go back inside. So it's very off. Yeah. I would that in that situation I was shooting one at a time. I wasn't trying to dual wield.
Oh, so you were just like you'd alternate them. You'd turn this one off and then you go grab it.
Unless I was doing time lapses of something happening and then I was shooting dual time lapse. But unless I was doing time lapse, I was one camera or the other. And then rain, I use the cheapo like plastic where you can buy like 2 for $10 that rain covers that are super lightweight that I can just literally like throw 6 in my bag. And they're really pretty much single use, but for the cost and the weight, you don't beat it. Like I love the Think Tank photo ones that I have a couple of, but they're just so heavy and big that it just takes up bag space.
Yeah.
And so it's the little whatever. They're on Amazon for like $5 or $10 for 2, and they just work. But like you can have rain come out of nowhere, and
just have a storm roll in and you just get drenched.
Yeah, 100%. Last year in the DR Congo, we were just about to wrap shooting for a little bit, and this thunderstorm rolled in. And when you've been in the bush, a lot of times we're doing like bucket baths. So like you don't feel clean. Like even though you're clean, you just don't feel clean.
Your sweat got off, but now you're covered in dirt.
Right. And it's always questionable water because it's what they bring up from the water source, and it sits in a bucket for who knows how long. And so we literally just like took off our shirts and went out, and like on the edge of the roof, like they had like a solid spot of rain. So we literally, or like water draining off. Yeah. So we literally just like showered under that.
Hey, whatever works. It's probably cleaner water anyway.
Exactly. It worked out really well. Some of the people looked at us funny, but like when they realized what we were doing, they just started laughing.
Yeah, they knew what you were doing. So to go along with like the weather being absolutely crazy and you not knowing what it's going to be like a day of, how do you deal with that with like events that are happening or just like changes in what you're actually shooting? Because like the weather can change, but also what you're shooting can change.
So there's a saying in Burkina Faso that's called Wawa, West Africa wins again, because you can have the greatest plan, but it'll all just like go to crap
when the winds
come. And perfect example, like when we were drilling wells, like a well comes up dry, say la vie, we were supposed to go to the next village and do some stuff in the next village. We're stuck here for another day because we have to try again on drilling the well. In March of 2013, we just landed in Burkina and we were trying to get out of the capital, and that morning something happened where there was riots and we couldn't leave the compound we were in until after the riots had died down a little bit. And we drive out, finally 4 or 5 hours delayed, drive out to the main road right by the house, and you just see tires burning in the street, and you look to the left and the riot crowd was like a block down going the other direction.
So how do you like change your plan to go with that? Because obviously, I mean, like that could change. Like if an event's supposed to be happening and you can't leave, how does that change what you're actually shooting? And like
you figure out how you can change the story. I mean, it's always having flexible stories. A lot of times, like I was saying last night, when we were in DR Congo, we got word when we got to the plane to go from Uganda to the Congo that this person we had to interview was only available in one city that was a 3-hour moto ride away from where we were staying. And they needed a person that had some familiarity, so we had to send the the development director from the org. And we literally outfitted him with like a mini tripod, a Canon G9 point and shoot, and a Zoom H1 with a Rode SmartLav.
Give him a quick overview of how to run it.
Here's how to do it. Sorry about getting super hot right there. But like, here's how to do it. Here's what we have to get from you, and good luck. Yeah. And also, here's some tips for like trying to make the lighting look halfway decent, or like things to think about when you're sitting him down, or like we get there and we're in Nebo and we're about to shoot, and then all of a sudden it's like, get a phone call. Hey, this person's only available for this moment. So it's a ton of flexibility of like knowing what you want to get done in your ballpark timeline of what you want to do when. Yeah. And
so you have a general idea of the story, and then you figure out the ways to like make it flow and fill in as things change.
And also because of the fact that we're doing very much almost like a commercial, like here's what we have to get fundraised, here's what we have to get fundraised, here's what we get fundraised. We look at the priorities. So like, what is the biggest project coming up? Here's what we have to get everything of, or else it's going to hurt the org. Yeah. Then there's like some lesser things. So like in DR Congo, we had what isn't out yet, but they're planning on starting to do some fundraising for a coffee plantation in the next like 6 to 9 months. That was our biggest priority. Then below that, we needed to do some stuff for the hospital to get more funding. Then right below that, they need a new truck because the current truck was a 1982 Land Rover, and while we were there, the transmission was sitting in the front seat.
So you weren't driving it around.
No. And then below that was this pig farm that they're trying to start on the same site where they're going to start the coffee plantation. But that's not as big a deal because it doesn't have the same startup cost. Then also they needed $15,000 to finish the school. We wanted to get some stuff around that. So like it was literally like, here's what the biggest priority is. Here's what
there's a ton of projects while you're there. Like you're not just going like, oh, we're just shooting this one event or this one thing happening. It's covering
this
a range.
Is literally like, what is an org trying to do in this region? Can we capture everything that they're going to be trying to do and potentially trying to do? Because there's things that pop up that they may not know. Like we didn't know that there was going to be the ceremony for the building. So like that's a thing that popped up that took literally an entire day out of our shoot. How do we adapt around that? Yeah. And then how do we make sure we get to the coffee plantations? We have to find coffee plantations that had coffee because we were there 3 weeks after they harvested. So we lost a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
How do we still adapt
of like the actual
story?
harvesting and stuff because it's already done.
Right. That kind of thing. How do we adapt the story? And that's so it's like just figuring out how do we get the story and how do we make sure we're getting the stuff that helps them do what they do best, which is help the people in that region. Because really the thing that gets me is orgs that are helping create sustainability in foreign countries, trying to take developing countries and like help improve the lives. I hate to use the term third world, but like if we can get them closer to second world, even though it's the least used term, where it's like get them more developed so that they can be sustainable where they are, then you see a lot of less issues in some of those countries.
Do you have a lot of do you have somebody that comes from the organization that sort of has the plan and they are sort of like directing it and like leading it like, okay, so this is happening, so let's drop this project, or do you have to make those decisions?
There's usually someone from the org that's helping me with that. Okay. And we're making game time decisions of what's available, what can we get, how long is it going to take to shoot this? If this person's available for an interview about this, that'll take us a half hour. Okay, we can go do that. So basically they're like field producing. Yeah. Because they know where the org wants to go. And they know what they need to get to be able to do the fundraising that they need to do. So that's a lot of it is just having the flexibility, but being able to have that discussion and openness of like, how can we maximize what we're doing and get the most out of the time that we're there? And that's really the biggest thing is just open communication and knowing the goal, because like a lot of it's interview. So like we don't know exactly what someone's going to say or how someone's going to approach it. Like we'll script certain things for certain people that we know like we need to get like the sales pitch or something. So like the development director for E4 project in the Congo for the truck video did it himself, so we could do a very specific ask on a certain way of doing it. Whereas like some of it with the coffee, like we went out into a field and talked to a local coffee plantation owner, and he talked to us about how it was so great when the coffee industry was booming in the 70s and 80s, and then in the late 80s talked about the downfall when Brazilian coffee became a thing, and then talked about how it's slowly come back, but now the infrastructure has changed and gotten worse, so they can't actually get the export out as easily. So it costs them more, so they actually lose money that they could have had because of the cost of getting the coffee out of the country.
How do you deal with like communicating with locals like that? Because you said you just went up to like a random plantation owner that was out in the field. Like, do they?
So we actually have like layers of translators.
Okay.
So like Congo, just because it's the easiest example. Dan from E4 Project was our field producer, and then Jean-Claude, who's the hospital director, speaks English, French, and tribal languages because he's Congolese from that area. And he's trained by American doctors and that kind of stuff. So he knows his languages. So he would translate from English to what language he knew. And then if it was a language he didn't know, because there's so many tribal languages out there, that he would have someone translate from that tribal language to French or a tribal language he knew. and then he would translate it to English. So it's like these layers of translation that we're trying to get as close as we can.
Yeah.
And then he would have a lav mic on him, and we would keep him as like a scratch audio.
Yeah, so you can hear him repeating back whatever.
So they would say like a couple sentences, he would then translate. They'd say a couple sentences. It takes a lot longer to do an interview.
Oh, yeah.
It would take us about 45 minutes to do a 15-minute interview normally.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then I felt bad for my assistant because she had to
going through all of it and trying to
she had to
figure out.
Listen to it and then like go back and be like, I think this is what was said then, and then get it, and then yeah. We'll have to send it all to him and make sure what's actually being said is correct. Like send him the audio track and be like, is this right?
Yeah, do you check this and just make sure we're doing it properly?
Yeah. So it's a ton of flexibility. Yeah. Also, being picky when it comes to eating food is a no-no.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole different...
That's a different can of worms.
Yeah. Talking about just the different things that you don't eat here.
It's like, I mean, it's like I was saying last night, like the joke is that half of the job is surviving the shoot.
The other half is surviving the food.
Well, no. I mean, when you get out there, like the food can get you, the bugs can get you. Yeah. Like I've had malaria. I've had
sicknesses and
food poisoning while I was there. I've had food poisoning afterwards from it. It's just like you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So getting through the shoot and getting a job done is half the battle.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think we're just about at an hour.
Sweet.
So I think, yeah. I mean, I don't have any other questions. I don't know if you have anything else you want to mention.
Oh, I didn't talk about what's coming up.
Yeah, talk about let's hear it. What's coming up?
All right, so coming up, what's definitely happening is I'm making a return trip to Burkina Faso. That's happening sometime this fall. We're still working on the exact dates, but that's going to be a continuation of some previous work. In 2014, my dad and a group of buddies installed a solar-powered water pump on a well, and that fed a 3,000-liter tank, which has now been expanded to 6,000-liter tank that feeds a garden. And the school that was installed at was barely being able to sustain, like, grow what they could with a hand-dug well. Mm-hmm. And it was not going to be sustainable long-term. But with this new system, they were able to go from what they could barely sustain to 6x growth in a year, and they were selling surplus produce in the local markets.
Nice.
Which is game changer.
Yeah.
Because it's not only helping them be sustainable, but it's also helping feed the community. And then so we're going to do a follow-up story on that, but then they also found a more cost-effective way of doing that water pumping that is all locally sourced parts, that is manual, a little bit more manual, so it's much, much cheaper. Mm-hmm. That we're going to do some video work and photo work about that process, so that way people in the US, they can start to do fundraising to try and get some of that more simplified method of water provision that can help, even if they don't necessarily get 6x growth, if they can get 3x growth, that's still huge. Yeah. And that's literally changing lives.
Any sort of growth is good.
Right. So that's one of my projects in the works. And then the other one that I'm still working through, we don't know when it's going to happen. We're still trying to figure out how much it's going to cost and all that. Mm-hmm. Is a orphan program in Ethiopia where the woman who started it is a former sponsored child from, I think it was Compassion or World Vision. And she has 1,600 kids under her umbrella of her orphan program. And so they have like nothing recent as far as marketing. So I'm basically going to be developing their marketing, everything.
And that's to get these kids
sponsored, and then they're trying to build some like education stuff and things like that to really help these kids. Because this is not just a one city thing. This is in like 3 cities around Addis Ababa. And that's, So like, it's awesome. Huge.
It's exciting.
It's exciting stuff.
It's good work.
It's a lot of back end work that people don't realize. Like people see the glitz and the glam of the photos I post on social with like me being there behind the scenes or like people there. They don't realize the conference calls and the internet like research.
All the business side.
Yeah. They don't realize the stuff that happens beforehand to make it there.
I mean, it can be months. I mean, especially like you were talking about with getting visas and like traveling, like planning all of that out.
We
can
started
take months to
talking about Congo a year and a half prior to going.
Yeah.
it took us just getting visas actually almost made the trip fall apart completely. In January of 2017, the government shut down because the president stayed in power longer than he was constitutionally allowed. And so they had our visas in their consulate and they couldn't get the approval because the government had shut down. So we...
Oh, no. And that was to get out?
No, that was to get into.
Oh, okay.
We were in the U.S., but we were we were anticipating them showing up like the day we were supposed to leave because we were originally supposed to go in January of 2017, and that day came and that day went, and we didn't have our visas, so we had to reschedule everything, and we ended up going in the end of February into March, and originally we were supposed to be there for 2.5 weeks. It shortened it to 9 days. Yeah.
Yep.
So
about half the time. Get the
a
same
lot of
amount.
that business back end changes things, and people don't realize a lot of the stresses that go into that. Or like Ethiopia has been a discussion since January of this year, and we're just getting to solidifying things out. Burkina's a little easier because I've been there in and out for so long. I mean, my first trip to Burkina Faso was 2007, before I had even touched a camera.
Yeah.
And so like.
With your dad?
Yeah, that was we were working on a library at a school.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's just one of those that like I know a lot of how to deal with that
The ins and outs.
there.
Yeah, you know the process basically.
So it's a lot easier. It's just a matter of the logistics of timing. Whereas, like, yeah, some of them it just gets crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess we're a little over an hour now, so let's. Anywhere people can find you, website, social media.
Well, I'm the only Simon Eisenbach in the U.S., so it's pretty easy just to do a Google search and find my name and find everything about me. The business shows up first on Google, but on Facebook, Simon Eisenbach Productions, Instagram at Simon Eisenbach. Be sure to like copy and paste my last name because people screw up spelling it all the time.
Yep. Yeah, I'll put it all in the links of the video if
And
you're watching
then
the video.
I don't use Twitter that much. My big ones are Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, talking a little
Thanks
about
for having me on the
remote
podcast.
travel. It was
It's been
fun.
a blast. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Take it easy.
So that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Thanks so much to Simon Eisenbach for coming on and talking about remote travel with us. If you guys want to check out more of his work, there'll be links in the description below to his Instagram and his website. So definitely go and check that out. I'm super pumped to start doing a lot more of these podcasts. And this is our first one, so we're working through a little bit of some bugs and tweaks and fixes and working out the format. But if you guys enjoy these and want to see more of them, let me know by hitting that like button. Leave a comment down below what your favorite part was, or if you have any questions about remote travel. Thanks so much for watching or listening if you're listening on a podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next one.